began in November 27th, 1893, and the newspaper said that the students went to church actually down here at Thankful Baptist Church. The church is now Princeton Free Will Baptist, but the building still remains. The newspaper said that the children gathered at the church and walked up the hill to their new school. And so by 1925, Langston would become the high school for the black population in Johnson City. 1893-1925, Langston was recognized as a normal school. That's important because in 1911, Mr. George Carter had a vision to create East Tennessee State College, and it was a normal school. And so for our history majors, you know, late 19th century, the whole conversation about how does American society move forward, normal schools were the way with which that would happen, and particularly as race, the concept of race really shapes and develops, how does the race move forward? And so you had a gentleman by the name of William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, who is really a staunch believer in the fact that normal schools are the way with which the race will develop. And so Langston begins as a normal school. By 1925, Langston will become the high school for the segregated school system. There were 3 buildings that made up the segregated school system. And so Douglas is on the east end of town, Dunbar is on the west end of town, and then high school, 7th grade through 12th grade, was Langston. Okay? The school faced Myrtle Avenue, and if you can imagine life before the interstate, the school faced Myrtle. There would have been office and classroom space here, and then down this slope right behind, you all look out the window, the slope would have been the auditorium. The auditorium is important because it was built in around 1925 with what was called Rosenwald funds. Rosenwald was Julius Rosenwald. Julius Rosenwald was the CEO of Sears Roebuck at the time. And so you can imagine early 1900s, kind of like Amazon of the 20th century. And so Rosenwald read a book called Up From Slavery. And of course we know Booker T. Washington's biography or autobiography. He read the book, and the story goes that the book changed his life. He gets on a train, he goes from Chicago down to Tuskegee, Alabama. He meets Mr. Washington, and he says, "I read your book, it changed my life. How can I be a help to you?" Mr. Washington says, "Colored children need schools." And so Mr. Rosenwald takes 1/3 of his fortune and creates the Rosenwald Trust, and schools would be built all over the South, Rosenwald schools. You go over the mountain into North Carolina and you'll see just that, Rosenwald schools. 1925, money from the trust is used to build the auditorium. So in 2015, when we're talking about saving the space, the alumni of Langston High School asked and pleaded to save what they called the arch, which was the entrance into the auditorium. So if you look right outside here, you see the arch. That was the entrance into the auditorium. They remember coming in that way. So that's their remembrance of that. 1896 to 1965. All right? That's the period of de jure discrimination in the United States, right? So we know that Plessy versus Ferguson is going to establish discrimination on the basis of law. We know that as a result, we're going to have a 2-tiered society. And throughout the American South, it will be pronounced. It will be manifest. It will not be subterranean. It will be exposed. It will be overt. Right? It will be defined in communities throughout the South. There will be one black and one white. You will literally see 2 Americas result. Right? If you think about every community and think about your hometown, there are certain institutions that define your community. The police station, the school, the church, the hospital. And those institutions might be called anchor institutions. If one of those institutions leaves, it can cripple the community. So in a place like Johnson City, you certainly had the school and the church. When you think about the what Dr. Michael Dawson called the black counterpublic, the school and the church defined the black community. Think about, for example, the American Bar Association, which is the institution of lawyers, right? And then because of segregation, black people could not be part of the ABA, so they formed the NBA, the National Bar Association. Think about, again, fraternities and sororities, but at one time black people couldn't be a part of those sororities, or those fraternities, so then you have what's now called the Divine Nine. And so Dr. Michael Dawson, professor of University of Chicago, he calls it the black counterpublic. All right, it's everything in the black community, even down to Masons. You may have the Scottish Rite of Masons, but then you have the Prince Hall Masons, black Masons. Okay, and so in a segregated society, we will see a black counterpublic to the white counterpublic. So when we think about Johnson City, St. Paul AME Zion Church, literally right behind us, and Langston are the two remaining structures that would give any indication of a black community here in Johnson City. So this whole area, and then on the other side of the interstate, would have comprised the black community in the late 19th, early 20th century. One of the things we want to do here at the Langston Centre is we want to respect the past. We want to tell that story of the black experience in Johnson City, as well as the black experience here at Langston School. Thus, that's why you all are here this evening. So we have a picture here of the dedication service at St. Paul AME Zion Church. This is 1920, and I encourage you to look at that. You see here different memorabilia from Langston School. People, the alumni of Langston, very proud of their sports. And if you think about it, you probably had people that were Heisman Trophy winners, professional football players and basketball players. If we did not have, again, a systemic racism of the time, where these men could have gone, where these, and particularly the men, but we also had women basketball players, where they could have gone in their careers if, again, these hurdles did not exist. The school is named after John Mercer Langston, the first African American elected to Congress from the state of Virginia. He's also the first dean of Howard University Law School. All right? He will be a mentor to Charles Hamilton Houston, who was the mentor to Thurgood Marshall. And he's also the great uncle of Langston Hughes. The school is founded by Dr. Hezekiah Hankel. Dr. Hankel grew up in Boones Creek in North Johnson City. Local physician, local minister, local politician, and educator. When he was practicing medicine, he wasn't included in the community. In about 1873, there's a cholera epidemic in Johnson City. And his counterparts are astonished. Dr. Hankel's patients are surviving, but everyone else's patients were dying. So he becomes a local celebrity. He becomes the first African American elected to the Johnson City Board of Mayor and Aldermen in the 1870s, in the period of Reconstruction. And then there's Mary Alexander. Mary Alexander had the vision for what is now the Langston Centre. Miss Alexander was a historian, taught at ETSU, taught at Northeast State. She wrote her master's thesis on the black experience in Johnson City. You all may have reviewed that. And so still kind of the go-to piece when we talk about the black history in Johnson City. And so Miss Alexander passed away in 2019, in summer 2019. We opened our doors in November 2019. So she didn't get to see her vision come to pass, but again, we're very appreciative unto her. We have a threefold vision here at the center. Respect the past, recognize the present, and realize the future. So I've already shared with you a little bit about this respecting the past. Recognizing the present. We're in the poorest census tract in Johnson City, and there's heavy disparities in this census tract. Child poverty, for example, is 20% for Johnson City proper, but in this census tract is 54%. Median household income for Johnson City proper is about $42,000 annually. In this census tract, it's $19,000. So when we have these little ones that just walked in here, we need to recognize the present. There is a thing called disparities, systemic disparities, and that based on some people's standards, these young people could be behind the 8 ball. We want these young people to realize that they have opportunities and that their zip code does not define their future. So we have a computer lab. Another lady you saw walk in, Miss Krista Reed, she's a literacy tutor. And so she's working with our young people. We do a lot of STEM education here. We also do a lot of experiential education. We want our young people to go to plays. We want them to do things that they've never done before. It's those experiences that's going to open up their mind. We also have a media lab down here at the end of the hallway. And we can do podcasting and videography. And we can record music. And we expose our young people to flute classes and guitar classes, because we want our young people to have these right opportunities. Thirdly, we want to realize the future. What is inclusive community? We have a Hispanic community, we have an African American community, we have a growing African community, and our Asian community is growing. And so we need a space so that people feel comfortable accessing, showcasing their culture, and at the same time, how do we build community as a result? If you've been born and raised here, lived here all your life, go through high school, 4 years of college, even graduate school, and the first time you ever interact with somebody different than you is at the workplace. If your boss is of a different color or somebody of a different, it may be a culture shock. So cultural competency is very important. And that's what we want to talk about here at the Langston Centre. As you all walk around here, just want you all to see, there was a black middle class, and I hope everybody can hear me, in the United States and in segregated America. There's a stereotype that kind of says or implies that poverty is just rampant in black America. But there was a time, even in segregation, where there was a black middle class. I'm not trying to romanticize segregation, but I am saying that there was a time when black folks owned businesses, black folks had a message or a mindset of aspiration. There was this whole dynamic of black excellence. All right? And so what you see here are individuals that would have represented Johnson City's version of the black middle class. In the 1950s, there was a group called the Proto Club. Proto short for Progress Together. And many of these individuals are educators, and they are also professionals. And so you've got people in here like Dr. Eugene Kilgore and his wife. Dr. Kilgore was the dentist in town. You've got people like Mr. and Mrs. Willie Norris. They were both teachers. Mr. Ernest McKinney and Miss Marion McKinney. If you've ever heard of the McKinney Center in Jonesboro, named after them. Mr. McKinney was the first African American elected to the Jonesboro Board of Mayor and Aldermen, April the 4th, 1968. The same night that Dr. King was assassinated is the same night that Mr. McKinney was elected to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, Mr. Elmer Crow. And so you've got individuals here that made up, again, what would have been considered the black middle class. And so we think that's worth talking about. We're just going to loop right around here. The photo down here at the far end is 1936. That photo made it to the Chicago Defender. In black America, the Chicago Defender was like the New York Times. All right? And so that photo made it with a caption talking about how Langston's team was one of the best teams in the state. The middle photo is a picture of Langston's band. Mr. Eugene Carruthers was the band director, and he got his education at North Carolina A&T, which is a historically black university. He brought that same energy from NC A&T, a historically black college, to Langston. So Langston's band was known throughout the area as being like the best. And then this last photo here is about probably 1963-64, and many of these individuals are still with us. This gentleman right here, Johnny Russell, is the first African American to play football at East Tennessee State. Mr. Russell is still with us and has plenty of stories to tell about, sometimes folks may use terminology about the good old days, and he said, with all due respect, there wasn't much good about it. He tells the story about playing at the Citadel and people pouring hot water on him. And he has some very raw stories. But again, a very resilient man and a good friend too. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune coined this phrase. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune is the founder of Bethune-Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida. She was a very close friend to Eleanor Roosevelt. She sat on the FDR's quote-unquote black cabinet from right outside the Depression up into World War II. And so she coined the phrase enter to learn, depart to serve. That's our desire here at the center, is that you come in, you learn, and then hopefully you take all that you've learned and you go out and you make your community a better place. That's what we try to do here at the Langston Centre.